Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for responding. I appreciate that. And welcome to the November full board for the Citizens Advisory Board, Savannah Riverside. This is actually our last full board meeting of 2024. Wow. All right. So without further ado, Phyllis?
Okay, I'd like to officially.
Are you?
No. Not working.
Hard.
It was working earlier, not working now.
There you go.
No?
Yep.
Yeah? Right. Okay. I'd like to call the November meeting of the Savannah Riverside Citizen Advisory Board to order. Welcome. And we're going to start with board introductions, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm Phyllis Britt. I'm the chairman. I've been on the CAB for 5 years. It still doesn't want to
There you
work.
go.
Okay. And we'll just go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Pat Kilroy, I've been on for a year, and I still don't know everybody's name. And then and hopefully I could remember it, though.
Hubert Von Tool, Chair Long-Term Missions and Budget. I'm not sure exactly how long I've been on.
Marty Ball from Charleston, and I'm a new member.
Carlos Cato. I've been on for quite a while now, since like 2017.
Yeah, about 6 years.
My name's Greg O'Quinn. I'm with South Carolina Department of Environmental Services out of the regional office.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Fulmer. I'm also with the South Carolina Department of Environmental Services in the central office.
Good afternoon. My name is Brianne Martin. I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 4 in Atlanta.
Mike Budney, I'm the manager of the Savannah River Operations Office for the Office of Environmental Department of Energy.
James Tanner, Public Accountability Specialist with the Department of Energy and the DDFO for the board.
Good afternoon. I'm Shelley Stansel. I'm with Georgia Department of Natural Resources Environmental Protection Division, and I'm with the Radiation Emergency Division.
Kim Ray.
My goodness.
Waste Management Chair.
Michelle Bush from across the water at Aiken, and this is my 3rd year serving on the
Don Colson. Yeah. Coming the 2nd year.
Scott McKay, CAB member.
Sade Shofadia, ANO Chair.
And my name is Juanita Campbell, and I'm your CAB administrator and facilitator. Hi. A few reminders. Board members, if you look in front of you, you probably see this little slip of paper. This is actually your parking pass for the next 2 days, for today and tomorrow. So make sure that you have this with you when you leave the parking garage. The machine will scan it as you leave. That way you don't have to pay for your parking, okay? All right. Also, please take note of the rules that are listed here on the banner for all of our full board meetings. It just ensures that we run smoothly and everyone is feeling like they are being heard while we are meeting all together. All right, and we'll move on to our chair update. Phyllis?
Yeah, it's been a couple of months. We did not have committee meetings in October, and so we have not been together in any form since September. Meanwhile, in the last couple of months, Candace, who is sick today, so she's not here, but she and I both attended The September, I wrote this down just to be sure I got it right. Environmental Management Site-Specific Advisory Board Chairman's meeting, the chairs of all of the cabs around the country meet twice a year together, and this time we met in Oak Ridge, and it was interesting to see because Oak Ridge, of course, was one of the early Manhattan Project facilities, and they're going through a lot of what we're going through as well. So it was interesting to tour their facility and to see what they're doing. They're actually turning over some land to private industry now, and I gather that's probably not going to happen to us. But anyway, that meeting was, as always, it's interesting to see how other cabs handle things and what problems they deal with. We don't have the same issues as some other facilities. One of the major ones that I always see when we go to those meetings is in other places they have tribal involvement. We don't have any recognized federal tribes in South Carolina, is that right? We do have tribes, but we don't have any federally recognized, and so they don't get involved in what we do. Oak Ridge was a little different from us in that they were, part of what they did was gaseous diffusion, and that means at one time they had apparently the largest building in the world. Now Boeing apparently. Mercury treatment. Do we have that problem? Mercury? Do we? Is that an issue? I'm sorry. I just.
Yeah, Mike Budney. Yeah, we do with mercury. We have mercury in the tank farms, but we have processes to deal with it. Yeah, it's not to the. I don't really. I'm not familiar with Oak Ridge's issue with the mercury, but I know they
just made a point of talking about it, and I don't remember it ever coming up as a major question for us. So anyway, they're working on some interesting things. One of University of Tennessee students came up with a way apparently to recycle strontium to energy plants, just for small reactors, and I thought that was an interesting thing. They've been able to remove 500,000 curies from Oak Ridge that are now being in new power systems. So I thought that was interesting too. During the round robin, once again, we heard the same issues that we have as far as recruitment, getting people on the cab, to stay on the cab, and how you go about that. Like I said, everybody has some issue. Our biggest issue, I've always said our biggest issue is that people are not too worried about SRS, live around it. So there was some discussion of AI. We've been talking about that and had a recommendation on AI going through. Then the other thing that Candace and I, again, both attended was an online program talking about consent-based siting, the consent-based siting research project. They're trying to get sites to agree to be what Yucca Mountain was supposed to be, at least as an interim storage location. And right now they're trying to figure out how to approach the communities. And so they have 12 consortia all over the country, one of which I think our contact point is actually CNTA. I think they're taking the lead locally on how to communicate with our area. And So they're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how they go about communicating. And I guess eventually will communicate, and hopefully someday we'll select a site. I think that's it.
Thank you, Phyllis. And we'll move along to our agency updates, beginning with DOE, Mr. Mike Budney.
Okay, thanks, Juanita. Hey, welcome to Augusta. Glad to be here. The closest major city in Georgia. It's always important for us to get over here and have these meetings in Augusta and strengthen our relationships with this community. Of course, we did have a visit by Hurricane Helene, and that made for an interesting final weekend as site manager. Just thrilled to have that opportunity to respond. We had not previously, to my recollection, actually stood up our emergency operating center completely virtually, but we had to do so there. Fortunately, we had many times due to, we saw weather coming our way, had a process by which we had weather phone calls, and all the major organizations participated in that. And that proved to be the way we handled this also, because many of the folks couldn't even get out of their driveway to get to the site. It was pretty interesting. A lot of power lines down. Of course, lots of hundreds of trees down. We had a couple emergency vehicles, fire department vehicles, that got stranded between down trees, and folks had to get chainsaws and cut their way out to them to get them back in service. It became a site emergency because of that, because one of the criteria is if the emergency response vehicles can't get anywhere they need to be in the site, then it's classified as a site emergency. So until we got the roads clear enough that the fire department could get anywhere they needed to be, we remained classified as having a site emergency. But the teamwork was fabulous between the Forest Service, site services, the fire department, and others. Just did a phenomenal job. Again, and within a week, we had everybody back to work and had the roads cleared. No real damage to our no damage to our nuclear facilities. All the emergency generators started up like they were supposed to. So even though we lost power to many of the, lost normal power to many of the buildings, none of the buildings actually completely lost power. And so the toughest thing was trying to figure out how to feed the people that couldn't get back off the site. But the contractors did a great job of making that work too. So, and in the middle of that, I was very happy at that point, once all the trees were down and everything was safe, to turn the site over to NSA to do the cleanup. So they're in charge now. As for our programs, first, Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative, that project's well underway at the University of South Carolina, Aiken. It's 85% complete. It's been done without any safety issues. Our next major milestone for this year is to complete the permanent enclosure walls, roof, and we'll have that done on schedule before the end of the year. The structural steel was an objective last year in November, and we were done with that on time. So it's really come along well. A lot of the interiors have been put together, including the interior walls, and all the windows are in. So we're really pleased with the progress. It'll be open for operation come summer 2025. And the lab is progressing with facility planning, documentation for security and operations, maintenance required, and preparing to move into the facility. The budget, you may have heard that we're on a continuing resolution through December 20th at this point, so we'll see what happens there. Hasn't affected any of our operations to this point. So, on to operational progress and achievements. In nuclear materials, L area continues to receive spent nuclear fuel shipments, both foreign and domestic. HCAN is making good progress. We have 3 dissolutions for the normal material that we dissolve as part of the accelerated basin inventory. 3 of those scheduled for this year. We did 7 last year. Part of the reason there's fewer is because the H Canyon is also using the electrolytic dissolver to take care of the fast critical assembly material. They completed 4 of a planned 18 dissolution batches. We hope to get them all done by the end of calendar year 25. Carrier continues down blending. We're planning to get 30 down blends of the EM surplus plutonium this year. They've completed 3 so far, and we're making good progress on shipments to WIP. We've done 6 shipments all told, 1 from E area and 5 from K area have gone out to WIP. The liquid waste program achieved another significant milestone with what we call preliminary cease waste removal for tank 9. In other words, tank's been completely emptied of its material and is ready for final closure. One of the things we did with this is, and actually we've also completed it for tank 10, and those are regulatory milestones in the federal facility agreement, and they're completed well ahead of schedule. And one of the innovations that helped us do this a little more efficiently is they're using drones to do the inspection of the tanks instead of a crawler. And it allows us to see the entire interior of the tank. The crawlers didn't really allow that before. So a better inspection, we can do it more quickly, and some great video is taken using those drones. Liquid waste program continues to make considerable progress repairing, replacing infrastructure and process equipment. And altogether, salt waste processing facility has surpassed 10 million gallons of radioactive salt waste processed since hot operations started. So now we got tank 9 and 10 done, and they're being ready for operational closure, and we're continuing to accelerate the completion of that preliminary cease waste removal, PCWR, for tanks 11 and 15 and 4. Hopefully get those all done within the next year. And it's impressive to see that the folks have figured out how to get those tanks emptied more quickly, especially the stuff in the old style tanks. Work continues on 19 tanks in various stages of design, construction, waste removal, or heel removal to support waste processing, defense waste processing, and in-stream delivery. To avoid feed breaks, it's important that we keep at least 2 batches of salt waste and 1 for sludge qualified at all times so that we keep feeding SWPF. The next accelerated basin inventory transfer to the canyon will occur in January. That process keeps moving to keep our dissolution of the material in the canyon going at the pace we're looking for. In FY24, salt waste processing processed 2.81 million gallons of radioactive salt waste. And since the beginning of the fiscal year, we've processed another 228 million gallons. That's not right. 220 million gallons, 220,000 gallons. Excuse me. That would be quite a record, 228 million gallons. We don't even have that much stuff to process. In support of faster risk reduction, as we've briefed here before, we're going after the record high curie concentrations. So really getting the highest curie material out of there as quickly as we can. In fact, compared to this time last year, SWPF is removing processing radioactive material from the tank farm that has 23% more radioactivity than material processed before we developed that high curie strategy. As part of the SWPF Climb to 9 initiatives, new longer crossflow filters have been designed and ordered to support improved filtration to achieve higher salt waste processing rates, and we're going to install those in the spring of 2025. On the defense waste processing facility, we focus on repairing and replacing infrastructure to increase its capability to support SWPF operations and continuing the conversion of glass waste storage building number 2. And that's running ahead of schedule also. Some of the key upgrades for defense waste processing, increasing strip effluent lag storage capacity. In other words, we're putting in place some tanks that when the defense waste processing facility, if it has an emergency shutdown for some reason, SWPF can continue to send material, can continue to operate. Right now, if DWF shuts down, SWPF has to shut down because there's no place to send its product. But once we get some extra tanks in place, then they continue to send it to the tanks, and then DWF can process that material later, and it increases the overall production rate for SWPF. They're also increasing strip effluent and monosodium titanate sludge solids loading, which allows us to reduce our rate for the sludge receipt adjustment tank cycle time from 7 to 5 days. So that also increases the production rate out of the defense waste processing facility. Saltstone production facility has stabilized over 4.4 million gallons of decontaminated salt solution in FY24. They mix it with slag and fly ash, as you know, and that's resulted in 7.5 million gallons of material in Saltstone. Let me see. We are on, as you know, we have Saltstone disposal units 6, 7, 8, and 9 are operationally ready for use. Finishing number 9 was one of our objectives for fiscal year 24, and that was completed last in February or March, well ahead of schedule. And now we're working on the final 3 SDUs, 10, 11, and 12. For infrastructure and environmental stewardship, the area closure program closed out fiscal year 24 with all 46 federal facility agreement and 9 Resource Conservation and Recovery Act milestones completed on or ahead of schedule. And 3/4 of those were done before their enforceable due dates. Just a great job by that team. They've every year I've been here, everything's been completed on time or ahead of schedule throughout that program. We're making really good progress on F area material storage building 235F. As you know, that's the building where we process the plutonium-238. We have received the pre-conceptual design package for review for the final decommissioning design. We moved a lot of material out, over 700 cubic yards of material weighing 107 tons. And my notes here say it's roughly the size of 25 African elephants, if you're looking for a comparison of that sort. 1,700 linear feet of asbestos piping, 1,200 square feet of asbestos HVAC insulation, and the list goes on, including a emergency diesel generator that went to the community reuse organization. So just great progress over there in 235F. And then finally, the 2023 annual site environmental report was released in September. And all sites are required to publish one each year by October 1st. So we got ours done a couple weeks early, and it's out there on the website for review. So subject to your questions, that's what I had today.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Then we'll move on to the EPA update with Ms. Brianne Martin. Oh, certain. No. My apologies. That was open for questions from board members. So we'll move on to the EPA update with Ms. Brianne Martin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianne Martin. I am a remedial project manager with the EPA, and I'll be covering for John today, but he will be back tomorrow to answer any lingering questions. So DOE in South Carolina have already signed the latest 5-year review for remedies with native soil covers, and hours will be signed before the December 21st deadline by our division director. We also completed a review of the L area remedial investigation and feasibility study draft, and this L area report was scoped by our core team earlier this year, and we had no major issues with the draft. And then lastly, we recently participated in the preliminary cease waste removal for Tank 9 and approved it. So this is now the second non-compliant tank this year completed, which then moves on to sampling and eventually tank closure. And again, if you have any lingering questions, John will be in tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from SCDES update with Ms. Susan Fulmer.
Good afternoon. Just got a few updates, piggybacking on what Brianne mentioned. We also, of course, participated in the preliminary cease waste removal meeting in October and issued our concurrence with preliminary cease waste removal. So that milestone was actually one of 3 for December of 2025. So kudos to DOE for getting that one completed well ahead of schedule. So we're looking forward to seeing the next 2 PCWRs for 2025 also completed early. And other meetings that we've had since our last CAB meeting, the ESOP program, which is the Environmental Surveillance and Oversight Program, had the quarterly meeting with SRS. That was recently conducted in the Aiken-Midlands office. There was also an NNSA SRPPF meeting and facility tour that was conducted with our regional staff, and that was conducted at the end of October. For inspections that have been recently held, the Saltstone monthly inspection occurred in October and in November. We've had ambient stream monitoring conducted, also both in October and November, and that's sampling of a few locations, upper 3 runs and South Carolina 125. And then another inspection that was conducted was for drinking water compliance, and that was for the A area drinking water system that was sampled for nitrates, and drinking water bacteria samples were collected from drinking water systems in A area, ATTA, Part Pond, and L area fire station. For our RECRA program, the mixed waste management facility application, that permit application was determined complete as of last Friday. And so that will continue with the review process. Those are all of the updates that I have for you. Any questions for me? Okay.
Thank you. And we can have our Georgia EPD update. Shelley Stansel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shelley Stansel from Georgia EPD, and I just have a quick update for you guys. At the height of Helene, we had over 225 staff members deployed across the state of Georgia for storm response. We had 72 members on task force teams to go out and clear debris with chainsaws. We had another 22 strike teams that were out on ATVs, clearing roadways, making sure that evacuation routes were clear, making sure that trees were removed off roadways. We did search and rescue. We had our parks and recs provided some sheltering locations for people who were evacuating from various areas during the storms, and also had to do storm debris removal from those areas as well. So it's been a busy couple of months for Georgia DNR. As far as the Radiation Emergency Protection Program goes, we have hired 2 new people, bringing our staff to 4 full-time equivalents, and we are training everyone to get up to speed so that they can start attending some of these meetings and providing training. Our primary role is with our nuclear power plants in Georgia and training first responders in those EPZ counties to respond in case of something happening at the plant. During the storms, our primary concern were those evacuation routes and making sure that if something did happen, we could get people out of harm's way. And that's all of my update. If anybody has any questions, I'm available.
No? All right, and we will move along to our committee updates. Nuclear materials, Donald Colson.
No updates.
All righty. Let's do waste management, Ms. Kim Ray.
Kim Ray, Waste Management. Unfortunately, we were unable to meet last month due to Hurricane Helene, but we have our next meeting scheduled for next month, and hopefully we'll get to talk about the requests made by our subject matter experts regarding their reports and helping them come to some more consumable reports that'll go out to the public explaining the liquid waste report and so forth. So we've been going over that, and hopefully we'll discuss that at our next meeting. Thank you.
Hubert Von Tool.
Thank you. Hubert Von Tool, Long-Term Missions and Budget. We have 3 recommendations circulating somewhere up in the DOE now, and I think that's probably enough. If you're interested in our work, this is the Amazing Disappearing Committee. I think by January I'll be down to 2 people, including myself, so if you're interested, got space.
Thank you. And administrative and outreach, Sade.
Hello, Shadi Shofadia, ANO Chair. So we still need more people on the CAB board. We're very low on recruitment, and we're looking to have a full board of 25. So everyone in this room, if there's anyone that you think would be a great contribution, just curious, and there aren't any particular requirements, please make recommendations. In addition to that, we say the CAB or the DOE SRS have put out digital ads in an attempt to attract more members, and have done a lot of guerrilla marketing around town. In Augusta and the Columbia County and Evans areas, there's a need for additional outreach. So the best outreach is us advocating to our personal networks, every CAB member. Please do so. I don't know if perhaps a toolkit would be resourceful. We can explore a lot of these ideas that I have for recruitment after this meeting at our ANO committee meeting. I hope to see you all there, please. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now here on the agenda, I have a break. So if we feel like taking a break, why don't we take about 15 minutes? And then we can come back and...
I'm just going to clarify for everybody. The reason why we're taking a long break right now is because our next presenter actually isn't in the building yet. And so we are buying time.
That is correct.
It's a distinct lack of options.
So thank you, everyone.
not our personal.
Megan, you haven't like picked a date yet?
I hope that everyone enjoyed their break. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all so much for your patience, and I hope you enjoyed that extended break. Let me put it to you like that. Joining us today from Archaeology Research Program is Mr. Buddy Wingard, and he's going to give us an update about what's been going on in his area. Buddy, you ready?
I'm ready. I'm good to go. I'm good to go. All right. How's everybody doing today? Thank y'all for having me. I think I've spoken to CAB several times over the years. Actually, I think numerous times over the years. A lot of new faces. Buddy, George Wingard, Savannah River Archaeological Research Program. We do not dig dinosaurs. Just wanted to put that out there, but we're still looking. Maybe, hopefully, we'll find something like that out on site, but we haven't quite yet found anything like that. A little bit of the fine print. We are the Savannah River Archaeological Research Program. We are a division of the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology, which is a department at the University of South Carolina. We are an on-site presence on the Savannah River site, and we manage and protect the archaeological and other historic resources for the U.S. DOE. What is archaeology? Archaeology is the study of people from the past through the things they left behind. We have a few things on site that were left behind, approximately 2.5 million of them that we have in our curation facility on site. I actually brought one here today for you all to look at the end of our presentation. A little more fine print. As a result of the federal and state laws and regulations, the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and our program, the SRERP, began in 1973 a phased approach to archaeological compliance involving reconnaissance surveys, general intensive surveys, watershed surveys, specific intensive surveys, data recovery, and coordination with major land users on and around the Savannah River site. So how we're going to boil that down is basically 1973, DOE reached out to the University of South Carolina and said, hey, could your archaeology program come down and look at the watersheds on site? We have 5 major watersheds on site, upper 3 runs, lower 3 runs, Penn Branch, Steel Creek, and 4 Mile. Those are our 5 main drainages that run through the site. The idea was to come in and look at those drainages for the cultural resources. Major cultural resources along drainages, any ideas? That would be Native Americans. Native Americans would have utilized those drainages. So that's what we were specifically looking for in 1973. And any of the early historic sites that would have moved inward from those drainages, particularly colonial period sites. The Antiquities Act of 1906 and the subsequent cultural resource laws and regulations state that the intent of Congress is the undertaking of cultural resource protection and investigation is to benefit recognized scientific or educational institutions with a view to increasing public knowledge. Archaeological, historical, and geoarchaeological research must be conducted within the Savannah River Basin in order to adequately investigate and properly manage cultural resources for future use. That's one of our missions, and I'm going to talk about our 3 missions in just a second, but that's one of our missions. One of our missions is to learn about the area, not only protect the area, but to learn about it so we can disseminate that information. Threefold mission, again, cultural resource management. We're there to protect and manage the nearly 13,000 years of history on the Savannah River site. Paleo peoples, the archaic peoples, the woodland peoples, the Mississippian peoples, and then there's a break. A lot of people ask when I give tours or when I talk about archaeology, they say, what tribes were on site? There were no contact period tribes on site. We had the Westos to the east of us. We had the Yamasee to the south, Cherokee to the north, off to the west. But our area was pretty much a dead zone. There was no contact. We've never found any evidence of any of the major tribes on site. And then, of course, around the 1760s, 1770s, we pick up the colonial period. In the area known as Cracker Neck on the site was one of the first areas that the colonial people settled. And from that period on, we go into the early 1800s. We get into the antebellum, postbellum period. And, of course, all the way to 1950 with the displacement of the former residents, 6,000 individuals. Secondly, research. DOE allows us this research agenda. Each one of us in the office is allowed to do research that dovetails with those particular cultural resource time periods. We have Native American, we have historians, we have people who focus specifically on the mid-18th century. We have folks that specifically focus on the archaic peoples. And we better understand, by doing research, we better understand those time periods, but we also better understand how to protect and manage those resources. And we can do all this a little more quickly, a little more cheaply, which DOE likes also. We can get in there and do what we need to do because we've been there since 1973. And finally, education. What do we do with this research that we learn from the compliance, that we learn by doing our research? We disseminate that information. We go out and speak to public events. We go out and speak at fall field days. We speak at schools. We speak at colleges. We do presentations. This past weekend was the large Southeastern Archaeological Conference being held up in Williamsburg. We had a couple of folks there presenting on research that was done at the Savannah River site via our program. So we get out, disseminate that information so that people know what we're doing on site to protect those resources and for DOE. Primary mission of SRP is to ensure that the Department of Energy remains in compliance with federal laws regarding archaeological and other cultural resources. In addition, the site use process, and I'm going to explain what the site use process is in a moment. The SRP works closely with the United States Forest Service, the USFS. We work real close with them every day to ensure compliance in areas that have been slated for logging activities, from first thinnings to complete regeneration. We work very closely with the U.S. Forest Service because they are one of the largest land users on site from what they're doing, the trees, the planting, the cutting, the thinning. And with that does come the land is being turned over with all that. So those archaeological resources can be impacted. So we work very closely with them to manage what they do and watch what they do to ensure, again, the protection of those resources. Because the SRP is an on-site presence, we're able to ensure that all undertakings comply with existing historic preservation laws and do so with little or no impact to the planned project. So let me explain what the site use system is. Over the years, I've spoken to a lot of folks on site, and a lot of them didn't know what the site use system is. How this works is there's numerous contractors on site. I don't even know the number at this time, how many exact contractors we have. But if a contractor wants to do a scope of work, what they do is they write up that scope of work in what is called a site use. And all of the other contractors on site get to look at this site use. So say, for example, the roads crew says, hey, we want to put a stop sign at the end of the parking lot in front of the 700 building. Well, archaeologically, that would come to my office, and within minutes, I can concur with that because I know that any archaeological cultural resources have been impacted or may have never been there, whichever the system, because of the building of that road, the building of the parking lot. We can immediately concur. Being on site, that allows us to do our job quickly. If we weren't there, DOE would have to reach out and get a contractor to say, hey, look, they want to put a stop sign at the end of the road, and it would go through that process that could take weeks. By the time you get a contractor in, or get an outside contractor in, but being on site, we're able to streamline that process. Say, for example, a contractor comes in and says, we want to put a monitoring well near one of those drainages, upper 3 runs, lower 3 runs, Steel Creek, Penn Branch, 4 Mile. As I said, that would be a high probability for Native Americans. So we would come back and go, oh, we're going to concur, we're going to let you do it, but there's a few comments. We need to go in and look at that area first. Within a couple of days, we will go out, look at the area where they want to put that monitoring well, and then come back and say, no problem, you put it there, no impacts will occur. On the other hand, over the years, we've had a few times where there was something there. Matter of fact, the artifact I'm going to bring you was part of a site use. But we worked with DOE and that contractor, and they moved the monitoring well 100 meters, I believe it was to the west. So working together, we can streamline that process. That's how the site use process works. Every day, 3 or 4 come across my desk. We're working on a large one right now. It's the solar farm project. We've been out there on the solar farm project for the last 8 or 10 months. We're going in, looking at the cultural resources, what could be impacted. So that's what we're working on now as one of our big site uses. Fulfilling the mission, just a few photos here. Am I in your way, sir? I'm sorry, I'm standing in your way here. Just a few photos here, a little old school transit there. And of course, our square holes, you know. People ask me sometime, what is it that I can do? What is it I'm good at? And I say, if you need a square hole dug, I can dig you a square hole all day long. Artifacts come out of the ground. This is on site. We use quarter mesh screen. So everything that does not fall through that quarter mesh screen is washed, bagged, and tagged. And as I said, is in our curation facility. Daily field work might involve pedestrian or shovel test surveys to identify archaeological sites. So our crew will go out every day on a site use. They work in a grid pattern of 30 meters, roughly 90 feet. Shovel test after shovel test after shovel test. If one of those shovel tests are positive for an archaeological resource, cultural resource, a flake from flint knapping, making a spear point or an arrowhead, a nail, a rusty nail indicating a house may have been there. We bag and tag that artifact, and then we come off that positive shovel test and go out in to kind of delineate what size we're looking at as far as an archaeological site. We have, as I said, 2.5 million artifacts on site, archaeological sites on the Savannah River site. We're pushing about 2,700 archaeological sites on the Savannah River site. Careful excavation techniques, as you can see, we get in there after the shoveling. We get in with our smaller tools, our trowels and things like that to look for any of the smaller evidence that may be there to help us understand what's going on. Specifically with Native Americans, sometimes we'll find a trash pit, and in that trash pit, it can tell us the types of food they ate, things like that. Screening the soil. Detailed mapping and measuring is a vital part of that. You know, once it comes out of the ground, it's lost, prehistoric or historic. So as we're digging, everything is mapped and photographed, so that data is not lost. Unfortunately, once it comes out of the ground, that context is literally destroyed. But by careful measuring photographs, we can protect that and at least have that data that we would need. Ground penetrating radar, we actually have 2 units now. Over the years, we've got 2. Ground penetrating radar, basically that little machine you see up there in your upper left. That little machine, it goes across the ground, and it gives us some data that you see here in the map. What we've done is we've run across a couple of grave sites here, as indicated by the little lines there. This was an off-site project. We were actually working in Graniteville in this particular project. And so it helped us to identify some graves. We do that on occasion. We go out and work in the public, and if we have time to kind of help with the public and be supportive in that role also. Ground penetrating radar also is one of those things that we didn't have to go in and dig, spend days and days digging, looking for the soil change color of a grave site. GPR does that for us. So there's no impact again. When we left, you wouldn't even know we were there. One of the newest toys, LIDAR, luminescence IDAR. I can't remember what it stands for. It's one of those long things. Iridescence something. Basically, the airplane flies over the ground, does the same thing that GPR does, ground penetrating radar. It sends the radar down, it bounces back up. So you see all these real pretty trees down here. Well, basically what it does is we get a layer that looks like this. We can wipe all those trees off, and we can actually see 17th and 18th century roads that are leading through, because the LIDAR is picking up every millimeter of the ground. So every millimeter of a dip of a road, once you pull these trees off, you can see a road that was running through there 250 years ago that visibly you wouldn't see today. So again, no impact to the cultural resources, no impact to the land. This is amazing technology we've got. We still need to be there, though. Occasionally, we got to put a shovel in the ground. So, again, all these artifacts we find, they come in after a day in the field. They come in. They're washed, they're bagged, they're tagged, they're analyzed, so we know what they are. We put them in our database. One of the artifacts we found recently, a little artillery button. So we were able to do a little bit of research. Hammond and Turner Bates factory was in Birmingham, offices in Manchester, England. They produced many high-quality buttons for the Confederacy. So it's amazing what one little simple button can show you, what can tell, or one little small artifact can tell you. Clay marbles, probably left by a child in the yard. Any guesses? Part of a gun? Yeah, it is. You want to know whose gun it was? I can tell you exactly whose gun this was. This was Roy Rogers' gun, because that's a toy. We were able to find out this was a toy gun. It was a Roy Rogers gun, so it was a toy gun. We were able to figure this out. Isn't that kind of neat? That's one of those neat things. You bring it back and you kind of go, wow. After we get done with all that, now it's time to present papers, or we write reports, and we write do presentations. So we sit around and we pull all that data together so that we can disseminate that information to the public. We can get it out and explain what it is we're doing, why we're doing, why it's important what we're doing. A few of our reports we have here, and all these are online at our website, srarp.org, O-R-G. Old Farm, New Farm, that basically talks about the rural modernization in the area from the 1880s up to 1950. We looked at so many of the different farmsteads that were there in 1950 via the Atomic Energy Commission acquisition records that we had on site, that we still have on site as far as copies. Distributional archaeology in the Aiken Plateau, that talks about all those different Native Americans I mentioned earlier, Paleo, Archaic, Woodland, Mississippian, and how they range over that 300 square miles we have. And Desperate Poor Country talks about the different time periods of historic history we have on site. So the Savannah River site, Savannah River Archaeological Resource Site, is dedicated to ensuring the protection of cultural resources, again, through cultural resource management, research, and education. And I mentioned the site use system, how we go out and do that. Timber compartment surveys, again, working very closely with the U.S. Forest Service, going out and surveying before them and after them and during them, to make sure that, a lot of times where the planting is taking place, takes place where historically are cultural resources. So it's not, it's not unusual to go out and right in the middle of a timber compartment, there's a chimney still left standing from 1950 when the house was moved, or a chimney will be standing there, or steps that kind of lead up to nowhere standing in the middle of the woods. Kind of interesting. Again, our curation, this says 2 million, but we're up to about 2.5 million now artifacts. These are all in our curation facility at 315M, and they're broken down between Aiken, Barnwell, and Allendale counties. And the way it's broken down is, for example, South Carolina is the 38th state. So archaeologically, anything in South Carolina is 38. Aiken County is AK, so 38 AK. And then whatever number 1 was some sites that were found up in the northern part of the state. We get into about the 2000s because literally we have 10, 12,000 archaeological sites in South Carolina. So we have numbers 38 AK, 2015 is a number we have on site. And then Barnwell is BR, with Allendale being AL. So again, we sometimes work off the boundaries of the site. A colonial site, you can learn a lot from a colonial site on site, but that's not the only place they were. You move over into North Augusta and Augusta, Barnwell, there are going to be colonial sites. And when the time allows us, we go out and work in these areas to help better, again, understand that resources on site. All that ties in together. Just because we have one little site on site and we learn everything about it, you have a comparable data set to work with when you work in a larger area. Some of our research, Carolina Bay research, a joint project with the Savannah River Ecology Lab, sediment collection, prehistoric distribution. Native Americans, the Archaic period and the Paleo period, utilized Carolina bays. These areas were kind of lowland water areas. You had ducks and creatures like that would come in and utilize the water, so Native Americans would live around the edge of it and hunt. It was a great hunting area. Mississippian project, looking for the Mississippian period here on site. How many sites we have? Mississippian. We do know that there were two mound complexes north of today's SRS, one on either side of the river. We know that there were two mound complexes south of what is today's SRS on either side of the river. Mound complex was ruled by a Mississippian chief. He was the man. He ruled everything. And then he had upwards of sometime 10,000 people would live around his mound. This would have been palisaded with a wooden fence around it. They would have traded. We have found evidence of trading from our area to Alabama. And you can tell by the pottery, the way the pottery's made, that they've traded across the southeast. The Bartley site, this was a Swiss brothers from from Switzerland that settled in New Windsor, today Beach Island, and settled there in 1737. And we went over and did some work there as part of our outreach, our volunteer program. We went over and worked in that area and found some really, got some interesting data from that site. Catherine Brown's cow pen on the SRS. Miss Catherine Brown owned her own property. She owned her own business. We're talking about the 1770s. And what she did is she owned a business where folks could bring in their cattle and have their cattle cut and slaughtered and done and cut up and what do you call that? Processing the cattle. So she had her own business. So a lady-owned business, 1760s, 1770s. Savannah River site, we call her Cat. We know her well enough now. We call her Cat Brown. So we've known her well enough. Investigations at the 19th century Bush Hill Plantation. This is an area that will eventually be impacted by the Three Rivers landfill. We knew that when we found the site, so we went in and began excavating. This is a footprint of the house. That's what the house would have looked like. Mr. George Bush, no relation to our former president, but Mr. George Bush was the landowner here. And he put his money, not necessarily, he put his money back into his land, not necessarily the wealth of his house. You can see that was just a simple house. So nothing, no big wealth there that he had, but he put it back into his property. Community projects, again, 1950, November 28th, 1950. So a couple of weeks from now, we're coming up on the 74th anniversary of the announcement by the Atomic Energy Commission. They were going to build a Savannah River project. We did a few books here, Memories of Home, discussing Ellington, Dunbarton, and Myers Mill. Again, all this is on our site. We presented copies of these over the years. I think we've handed out about 10 or 12,000 copies, beginning in the mid-1990s, back when we could get these printed through the government printing office. But you can get these online. Again, just download the PDF. A few years ago, we fell into the movie-making business. We decided to expand a little bit how we present, and we started making a few films, Discovering Dave, about a Dave jar. How many people have heard of Dave? Dave the Potter. I know some of you have, because I've brought this several times. So y'all probably like, oh goodness, he's brought that jar again. But Dave the Potter from Edgefield, I'm going to explain to you in a few minutes who he is. He's in the box here. So we decided we want to do a little film to talk about that. Hawthorne, one of our communities that was displaced, actually in 1926, federal government came in and said, you don't need a post office anymore. So they took their post office from them. So in 1926, they kind of quit becoming a small community. Mart to Art, a repurposed life. The Lee Banana Case Company was one of our largest employers on the site prior to the Savannah River project. They made baskets that you would ship fruits and vegetables around the country. And The commissary is now in Barnwell. If any of you from Barnwell, go to Barnwell. There's a little building over there called the Red Barn Pottery. That used to be the commissary at the Lee Banana Case Company. So it's got a long history. Today you can buy art in there. The lady that owns it makes pottery. So a neat history of that little building that was built in 1926 and then is still being utilized today. Volunteering, to date we have 4 volunteers that still come on site. They're badged, they go through all the proper protocols, they come on site and come in and they wash artifacts, they help us analyze, they type up our databases, things like that. Sometimes they meet us off-site at public events, so they're very much interested in what we do and want to be a part of it. So if any of you want to volunteer, please just let me know. Again, education, exhibits, public tours and excavations, public dig opportunities, annual summer archaeology camps. Savannah River Nuclear Solutions has been doing these public tours since I think 2016, 2017, and about that same time spun off a second tour, which is the history tour. So we do 8 of those a year, 4 in the spring, 4 in the fall. In the spring we go to Dunbarton, and in the fall we go to Ellington. So be looking for those at srs.gov for their tour schedule. I think they'll be putting that up the first part of December. If you're interested in taking a bus tour, you get to see me. I'm on those tours. Outreach programs, we go out and teach, speak with kids and talk about archaeology and what we do. And in 2018, we celebrated 40 years, 40 years on site as the SRERP. We had been there since '73 for those watershed surveys. So it's kind of a weird number. We were there for 5 years before we became a program. So this year, I'm saying we've been there over 50 years. So actually, we've been there 45 years as a program. And there's a few of our links to some of our things. On the interwebs, you can go to the Facebook page. We've got the website you can look at. And we post a lot of our reports and whatnot on there. So I think that's it. Any questions for me so far? There's a lot of great facilities around the country. Oak Ridge, Hanford. SRS has so much that they offer, and especially with our history, the history that we have on site. 13,000 years of history, besides all the great work that's been going on since 1950. So as a program, we're very happy, honored, and humbled that we're part of what goes on site. We all enjoy what we do and really are happy to be there. Yes, sir.
So actually, so we're going to actually open it up for questions from board members at this time. All righty. Phyllis.
Phyllis Britt, CAB. I have 2 questions. What are some of the oldest things that you found? You said something about 13,000 years.
The oldest artifact we have in our collection is a Clovis point. A Clovis point is the oldest diagnostic artifact that we have in the North America. Clovis Point was named after the location where it was first found in Clovis, New Mexico. This would be a spear point that what we call the Paleo people would have used. So that Clovis, we have several of those in our collection. A couple were found early on, back when we would just grab things out of the ground. The last couple we have found were very, very carefully excavated. We did not touch them. We utilized processes by which we were able to take it out of the ground without touching it, because there are so much new and continuing new research out there. And there's a theory that, for example, a Clovis point that's been in the ground for 13,000 years, or any point that's been in the ground, you could actually pull microns of blood off of these and run it through DNA testing to maybe possibly see how it was utilized. It's still, that research is still a little, but we did test one and it came back elephant. So obviously there was no elephants running around on site, but there were mastodons. So, pretty interesting. Your other question?
My other question is, what would you say out of the, did you say 2.5 million artifacts is your favorite? Oh, good. Okay.
That's why that goes with me everywhere I go.
Okay.
And it sits in my office. And I'm going to bring that out in just a minute, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yes, Hubert.
Hubert Von Tool, CAB. Thank you for that very interesting presentation. I also have two questions which have nothing whatsoever to do with each other. The first one is, what changes do you anticipate with the change in landlord of the overall site?
I certainly hope none. I think with cultural resources being enacted by Congress, my certainly hope is that will not change. I'll leave that there, but that was a fear a few years back that some of the environmental stuff may have been taken off the table, and archaeology was a part of it.
Thank you. My other question was whether you had reached out to any of the other colleges and universities in this region. I know that Augusta University has archaeologists on their faculty. I can't speak for the others. Whether you had reached out to any of these universities or colleges.
In regards to, just in general?
Just working
I've been public speaking for 30 years. I know everyone at Augusta College. I've spoken at Athens. We have a lot of collegial cross research with so many universities across the Southeast, the Eastern Seaboard. The lady that found our elephant was in Seattle. They were up at the Burke University up in that area. So yeah, we do. Great question. Thank you.
Alrighty. Coming around, Kim. He's over here.
Oh.
Kim Ray, CAB. I have two questions too. Are all the artifacts that you mentioned stored on site?
They are.
Okay. And have you ever loaned any for exhibits to major museums like the Smithsonian or anywhere?
On very rare occasions. We on occasion loan stuff to the Aiken Museum, Aiken County Historical Museum. On occasion, researchers will reach out and want to look at something, so we usually bring them on site or meet them, for example, at the University of South Carolina, because they'll usually fly into a Columbia, and we'll take the artifacts up there and sit in our labs up there at our main office on Pendleton Street. So on occasion we do, but not very often, especially to places like, the Smithsonian. They have so many great things, so.
All right. Michelle.
Hi. Michelle Bush, CAB. I have a question and a couple of comments to some things that you said. You did say that there have been excavations and that projectile points and whatnot have been found. However, you said that there was no evidence on the immediate SRP site that indigenous people actually live there.
A contact period. We're talking the Cherokee, the Westos, that time period. We've found no evidence there. And interestingly, one of the main reasons is when you look at DeSoto's account, when he talks about coming through the South, he literally writes about coming through that area in the 1500s or so, that they all nearly starved to death. He had already went through Florida. And while in Florida, came across many indigenous people and traded with them. So his idea was, as he was going to be coming across the interior, he'd be trading with people every day, and they'd be getting a pig here, and this, that, and there. They nearly starved to death. Once they kind of crossed into basically the Broad River in Columbia, of course it wasn't called that then, until they got nearly to what is today Alabama and Mississippi, they didn't come across anybody. And so that whole swath and Savannah River site, today's Savannah River site, kind of falls in that swath where there was nobody. Now, we tend to believe probably the northern part of it, because we do have Native American encampments in Graniteville, the Westos. You got the Yamasee. There's no doubt that they would have traveled into that area, but because of such a span of time and because it would have been so small that we didn't find it. Now, had they camped for years and had an encampment, we would have seen those artifacts fall diagnostically more into a 17th or 18th century time period. But unfortunately, we don't. Our earliest is the Mississippian period, where we can kind of tell where that technology of pottery making kind of ended. Contact period Native Americans, their pottery making techniques were more advanced, so we just don't see that. So that's kind of what we look for. So.
And so that takes me to the question, so therefore the artifacts that you have found, projectile points of such, were probably lost or dropped there as people were traveling or just camping out at that particular time?
Well, they would have been left or forgotten by the possibly large populations of people that would have been there 13 years ago, 13,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago. So, there's no doubt there was a large population at those points. Okay. But around 1400, by the time the Mississippians, they're all gone. They're gone. Okay. They're all gone. Okay. Yes.
All right. And I'm asking, so many things are familiar. I taught 8th grade South Carolina history for many years, so all the things are familiar to me in the time periods. But just the other thing I have is the comments. So we talked about the George Bush settlement, that plantation. And so the name that I carry comes from there. That was the name I married into. However, there's no, from what my in-laws have said, that there's no biological connection. Okay. They were bought and placed on that particular plantation, but no biological connection, but thus the name from that plantation. Okay. And also when you mentioned the Lee Banana Case Company, my father-in-law worked for that company. Okay. He is now right about 95 years old.
I could tell you his name.
Okay.
Clarence Bush.
Exactly.
There we go.
Exactly. A great historian, has a mind like a...
I actually interviewed Mr. Clarence for the Mart to Art. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So he is a part of that history. And so he says, and he has the date, he says when certain people give the date of the last day of the banana leaf plant closing, he says, that's not the right date, that's not the right date. I can tell you exactly what day and what time because I was the person who turned the key.
And what's that date?
I don't remember.
It was July.
He remembers.
It's either July 4th or July 7th, 1951. One of the dates, but yes.
My mind is not as sharp as his.
Yes.
But he remembers.
Yes, exactly. He was one of my favorite interviews I ever. Yes. I saw him the other morning. I took my car in there to be worked on. So yeah.
Well, I'll see you sometime. That's my brother-in-law.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Sade, did you have? Yes, I saw. Go ahead.
Sade Shofadiya, SRS CAB. Thank you for your presentation. I was curious if you have conducted any archaeological research with any wildlife species.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Wildlife species and insects.
We haven't. We that would fall under the Savannah River Ecology Lab. Savannah River Ecology, University of Georgia has done extensive work out there since 1950 with the different plant and animal species there on site. And we work very closely with them too, because all of us, between the protection of the cultural and the natural resources, we all work great together. But yeah, if you have a particular question, I know some folks I could certainly ask about if you're interested in a particular animal.
If they're interesting discovery.
I'm sure they could tell you a whole lot. Mr. Charlie Davis, who used to be with the Ecology Lab and now with U.S. Forest Service, that's his forte. So, yeah.
Okay. I am also curious about the instruments that you use for the ground penetrating radar, lidar pulses, lidar returns, and the light detection ranger.
The LiDAR, actually, we don't do that. That's, over the years, there's been different companies that they'll fly over and then they give that data, for example, to Aiken County, so we can reach out to Aiken County. Don't quote me on this, I think the site has LiDAR layers, I believe. Don't quote me, but I believe they have LiDAR layers themselves in part of Barnwell County. So what happens is these companies will fly over, and then the counties, Aiken and Barnwell County, can get it for different sections. So we just reach out and get that data because they're allowed to fly over the site at that height to get that. GPR data, back in 2008, 2009, we bought our first ground penetrating radar, and we just updated it last year. Nothing wrong with the old one, but it was kind of time for a new one. We all know how to run that particular machine. We use that on site for delineating some of our cemeteries. We have 33 cemeteries still left on site. There were approximately 600 cemeteries on site that were moved in 1950 during the displacement. So we have 30 on site, about 800 individuals are still buried on site, and that's part of the resources that we manage. So we use the machine for that. We also do use it on occasion off-site to help. Again, we don't want to go in and dig if we don't have to. That disturbs the cultural resources. So the GPR gives us a lot of great data without having to, upend.
That's why I was curious about like what tools you were using, because there was a comment. There are some recent tools. Just curious how up to date your tools are.
Oh,
there are some tools where you're able to do very sophisticated advanced that would otherwise take months.
I know I look like I'm 28 years old, but I'm a little bit older than that. But my guys in the office who are younger, they come to me with those new tools she's talking about, and they're like, "This is a new tool." So we have some of that, and actually the piece of equipment you're talking about that can actually read some of the elements. The University of South Carolina, our parent organization, has that piece of equipment. So we have on occasion taken some of our pieces of stoneware up, and they're actually able to read the analysis of what the stoneware is made out of. So if we don't have it, which I know the young guys in the office are chomping the bit for me to be able to work that into the budget, we know who does have it. So, yeah.
Awesome. I'm also curious about the findings from your timber compact surveys. Like, what were the findings? I know you mentioned.
Well, I mean, we've been doing the timber compartment surveys, for 50 years. Again, our goal is when they want to go in, when the U.S. Forest Service wants to go in and plant trees, they usually are going in to cut trees that have been there first. So what we do is we go in and we kind of survey the area. They go in and cut. We go in behind them just to make sure that no artifacts were pulled up out of the ground. And they do such a great job when they cut out there. Very little impact. Really what we're doing for the U.S. Forest Service is going in ahead of them to find out where they can put their logging trucks so they're not sitting it. But for the most part, what's on site as far as the timber, they are planting in areas that would have, culturally resources would have been more historic. So we would have been talking probably 85 to 90% of what is planted in the timber on site is utilized farmland that would have been farmland in 1950. But on occasion, they're planning on where there would have been a house site. So we go in and look for evidence of where may have been the home site for that property, and they'll actually work around it. We'll put a fire break around it and leave those piers, leave that chimney there. So predominantly, we're finding historic, evidence of historic cultural resources, brick piers, chimneys, broken glass, the trash pits they would have left. That tells us a lot. The mason jars and the can jars and things that they threw away. So.
Thank you. And last question.
Sure.
Curious about are your videos accessible via?
They are. You can go to srerp.org and just look under videos. All our films are there. During COVID, because we couldn't get out and speak to public, we started making short films about some of our artifacts. So I think we're up to like 24, 25 of those videos. We just discuss an artifact in our collection so that we can continue that outreach even though we couldn't get out during COVID. So srarp.org, just look under videos. And also if you play on the Facebook, you can look on Facebook, Savannah River Archaeological Research Program, and all our videos are on there also. You can go down and find them. And we try to post stuff every few days of what we're doing in the field and neat artifacts, things like that. So, yeah.
So cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional questions from the board? No? Thank you so much, buddy.
You're quite welcome.
You.
Yep.
This was a lot of fun, always.
Thank you. Okay.
Did you want to?
Sure. I was going to be.
Let's do it.
Okay. So in 2006, the crew goes out and they're working in an area for a site use where they were going to put a monitoring well. And we went out and looked at the area. It was right next to a farmstead. And we asked them, could they move it up the road a little piece? They said yes. So we all worked in compliance together there, got it all moved so it didn't impact the cultural resources. But while we were there, we found a piece of pottery. And on that piece of pottery, it had the word Dave written on it. And Dave was the name of an enslaved individual from Beach Island, who made pottery. You said some of you who have heard of Dave, right? Some of you? Right. Dave Drake. So what we have here today is, it belongs to the federal government. It does not belong to me. I am retiring soon, so if they want to make a gift of it to me, that would be. But that being said, it is the only Dave jar that has been found in, I'm getting too old for this, Dave. It has been found in an archaeological context. It's a 4-gallon jug. Got his name on it, Dave. I'll walk around the room so you can all see. Got Dave's name on it, Dave. April 16th, 1862? Yeah, 2. You think I would remember that? April 16th, 1862. I know y'all folks have seen it so many times. April 6th. This particular jar, we believe, was used as a sauerkraut jar. The reason we know that is when you look inside the jar, all the glazing has been eaten off the inside of the jar, which basically means the acidity of the sauerkraut ate the glaze out of the inside of the jar. So this was used as a sauerkraut jar, is what they had in it. And it's the only Dave jar to be found in an archaeological context. We're pretty proud of that. So no other Dave jar has been found in an archaeological context. It's heavy, so I'm gonna set it down. It was broken into 19 pieces, and it weighs 18 pounds. So I put it back together, and it's held together with a specific type of glue that I can soak this in hot water, it'll melt away, and it will leave no residue on the sherds. We can test them. And so got one handle's missing. It says LM. LM was the gentleman that owned Dave at the time. His name was Lewis Miles. So Dave would always put Lewis's initials. Lewis Miles, April 16th, 1862, and he signed the name Dave. Now Dave did also write poems on his jars. Not a lot. We guesstimate in Dave's life he would have made about 80,000 jars. To date, we have about 300, 400 that we can definitively say are Dave's, either because they've been signed, dated, or with the poems. As far as the poems, there's only about 40. And he wrote things like, "Oh, moon and stars, it's hard work to make big jars." My favorite was from 1856, 1857. He writes, "The 4th of July has surely come to blow the fife and beat the drum." Okay, so think about this now. We have Dave the Potter, 1857. He's still a slave. But he writes on this jar, "The 4th of July has surely come." What are we celebrating on the 4th of July? Our United States' independence from Britain. But he's not free. He's not independent. So, although Dave at this time was with Lewis Miles, who probably gave him a little bit of leeway on what he could write on those jars, he was always careful about what he wrote. So, did he mean anything by that? I don't know if he meant anything about it. Do I think he meant something about it when he wrote it? Oh, no, certainly he did. There's no doubt in my mind. He wrote on one jar. Mr. Miles came into his shop one. You tell me when I'm rambling, because now, boy, I'm on a roll now. I could go. You pull me with that hook. Pull me with the hook. Okay. So Dave was in his shop working, making a jar, putting his handles on, and Lewis Miles walks in. And Lewis Miles says, that's a bad job, Dave. That handle's going to break. So what Dave does, he takes that jar, and he writes on the side of that jar, LM, Lewis Miles, LM says this handle will crack. And he dated it. And to date, that jar is still in a private collection in Charleston, and the handle never broke. So he wrote that on that jar. So Dave, it's such an amazing story with Dave. I love talking about Dave. I love, it's such an amazing story to tell Dave's story. So But again, our Dave jar, we're very proud that we have it in our collection and can share it and bring it out. And I think anytime I get a chance, and I just drug it halfway across Augusta on my little roller to get it here today. So, but yeah, so thank you.
If I may, also, what is so significant about this pottery is Dave wasn't the only enslaved individual who actually made pottery. And keep in mind that enslaved individuals were not allowed to read and write. So here he is making this pottery and signing his name and writing poetry into this pot, which is something that he really and truthfully could have gotten in trouble to do. So there's so much more history behind just looking at a pot and saying, oh, Dave signed it, David Drake. But he was also one of several hundreds of potters, especially in the Edgefield area, that actually engaged in this activity in the woods and reading and writing when they weren't supposed to.
Or was Dave
in the microphone?
Do you know the race of Dave, or if he was like half white?
No.
Dave was
like taught to read and write.
Dave was country born. Yeah. We know that from records. His first owner was Mr. Harvey Drake, and in Harvey Drake in 1818 took out a loan. He needed some money to build a pottery, and in that loan he listed all of his assets. And he talks about Dave, and he says, Dave, who is about 17 years old, country born, which means he was born here. I'm assuming of African parents.
He was completely African American. He was not, biracial. There's actually a couple of books that you might be interested in. I'll be happy to share that information with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that you can read about his life. There have been a couple of documentaries about David Drake as well, including David Drake and then an alleged assistant that would work with him when they would be out in, especially more specifically, the Horse Creek area. But there's lots of information out there. More and more keeps coming up because it's almost like so many people know little tidbits about him, and then they come together and it forms this wonderful story. And it's actually gained national attention. There was an exhibit called Hear Me Now that was actually about the great African-American potters in Edgefield that was actually at the High Museum for a very long time. They actually debuted that at the African-American Center in Aiken when I was still working over there. And so that exhibit traveled all over the United States, and it landed finally at the High Museum, and that was where, I think that was the last time it was on exhibit. But there's lots of information out there about potters, and a lot of them would also send messages through their pottery. So it's a deep history for this area for anybody who's interested, but we can talk more about that a little bit later.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As far as reading and writing, Harvey had an uncle named Abner Landrum. Abner Landrum owned a newspaper in Edgefield, and Abner traveled up north where he met another potter while up there, and that potter was allowing his slaves to read and write. And so he came back and said, hey, Harvey, we need to do this. Now, this was around 1829. And so it did not become a law until in the mid-1830s that you couldn't teach a slave to read and write. So we believe Abner's the one that brought that idea back. And Harvey was like, sure. So we believe that's how Dave learned to read and write.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So how are you storing these things? What is your storage method to preserve them? For your artifacts?
All of our artifacts.
Yes.
Our artifacts are stored at 315 M. It is temperature and humidity controlled. All of the artifacts are stored in acid-free bags, acid-free boxes, so that there's no contaminants to get in with those. So again, the building is humidity and temperature controlled. And so we check that pretty much every day. We have a gauge in there that tells us, the fluctuations with the temperature and the humidity. If there's a problem, we call the services on site who come in and tweak the humidifiers, tweak the air conditioners to keep all that running. We share that building with the Cold War, historic Cold War preservation program on site. So they actually have 2 rooms with their documents pertaining to everything post-1950 in their artifacts. So we're all in one large facility and maintaining that humidity and temperature. Make sure that those are protected. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, well, again, Buddy, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome.
You're more than welcome to have a seat if you want to leave it out or pack it up, however you want to do that.
I think there was...
Okay, that wanted to take a look, not a problem. All right, we're going to move right along. You're more than welcome to have a seat there if you like. Do we have any board business? No? All right. Then we will go on, move along to our public comments. I do have one name that's on the list. Mr. Lawless, you may now approach the microphone.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Certainly.
A little bit worried about the CAB. Department of Energy, at EPA, DHEC, up at Georgia EPD as well. No question. I found that environment. That would never happen. And I was pleased to see the archaeology talk. However, I changed my opinion about the board at that time. What that tells me is that the board feels comfortable with some subjects and not with others. You should not hesitate to ask these authorities questions, even when the question is not a good question or is ill-formed. It puts them on their toes. And I would also put these officials on notice as well. I think you've got to find a way to have a couple of questions in your pocket that the public asks you from time to time so that you can kind of help to break the ice. But please ask questions. That makes the wheel go round. A lot of you don't know who I am. A little bit of my history. In 1983, I blew the whistle on the Department of Energy because it was using seepage basins and cardboard boxes to dispose of most of its solid radioactive waste and abusing its own regulations. And after that, I testified before Congress, and after that, Louis Shaw from DHEC invited me on over to his office, and when I showed up, there were 30 DHEC technical people around the table saying, including Louis, saying, hey, there's nothing we can do to control the Department of Energy because it's off limits to us. And I used a couple of French words there to assert that, no, that's not true. The Department of Energy is not allowed to contaminate your drinking water, and you control the drinking water of the state of South Carolina and the state of Georgia as well. So you can hold the Department of Energy hold their feet to the fire. After my PhD in 1993, the Department of Energy invited me to join this CAB as a founding member, and I wrote the first recommendation. And also wrote the recommendation to close the radioactive waste barrel ground, the old one, and also to close the first two high-level waste tanks, 17 and 20. And this board adopted those recommendations, and I was very pleased to see that. These are the two first regulated high-level waste tank closures maybe in the world. We only had 51 tanks at the Svenneru site. Hanford's got, I think, 177 tanks. The Svenneru site's closed 8, and 2 more on the queue to be closed soon. Hanford is closed, rhymes with 0. So they have done nothing. And part of the reason why is this board makes its decisions based on majority rule, which we adopted. The Department of Energy doesn't like majority rule, but they allowed us, to its credit, to use majority rule. Hanford uses consensus-seeking rules, which messes everything up and prevents the board at Hanford from pushing the Department of Energy there at Hanford to get its job done. And I think that's why we've done so well. I'm here today to suggest 3 recommendations to this cab. One of them is a feel-good recommendation. I think we should, you should have a recommendation to the Department of Energy to have a party or a meeting once a year for the public, especially bringing back the old board members. This Fenner River site is a national treasure. You need to find some way to honor that and bringing back the board members, having a tour at SRS, bringing people up to speed, listening to the old stories. I think that's good for CSRA. I'm sorry, I'm losing some things. I'm now 82, so I'm not as sharp as I once was. Although I shifted into artificial intelligence, I might make a little news here, and human machine teams, and my 10th edited book just got published, and it's listed at Amazon, but it's $175, which I think is insane. That's neither here nor there. So I think y'all should have an annual party. Number 2, you should push to remove from SRS 2 WIP some of the vitrified high-level waste canisters. This is an action that I hope that your Waste Management Committee will take. Now, the Department of Energy will tell you that WIP is overloaded. They can't handle what they got right now. But this is an important precedent because you do not want to leave some of the most dangerous waste on the planet on the surface of this area. We're not going to be here that much longer. I'm definitely not going to be here much longer at 82, but neither is the United States, maybe. Who knows? You had the archaeologist, anthropologist, a history guy talking about going back 10,000 years. Well, in 10,000 years, this is the only study I know, Lee Poe, when he worked for DuPont at SRS, concluded that thousands of people could get harmed or killed if those canisters are not removed from the Savannah River site. So it's the only study I know, and I think Lee Poe is no longer with us, but I still think it was a good study. You need to get that off, and you need to set the precedent to get those canisters removed. And some of those canisters are extremely lightly contaminated compared to others, which are very hot. And some of them can be classified as transuranic waste, and that would be the tool that you can use to remove them from the Savannah River site. Third, I see in your motions that you've demanded or requested that NNSA have a relationship with the cab. I would go further than that. I would push your congressman, I'd push DHEC, I'd push EPD, I'd push anybody you can, legislators, to get NSA under advisory, being advised by the Savannah Riverside Citizens Advisory Board. If you don't, you cannot trust them, as we could not trust the Department of Energy before this Citizens Advisory Board was established. Trust is a critical thing, and I hope that the NNSA is listening and the Department of Energy, because you need trust. If there is a mistake, heaven forbid, where waste from NNSA gets into the groundwater, that would be that would be a disaster. You don't want that to happen, and I don't want that to happen. And NNSA should get off its bahonkas and allow the citizens to hear what's going on out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawless, for your comments. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? If you'd like to take a look at the pot following the meeting, you're more than welcome. Mr. Wingard has left it out for everyone to kind of come and see. But if there are no other questions or comments for the day, then Ms. Phillips?
We won't gavel out simply because we meet again tomorrow. So I'll see you tomorrow at time?
In the morning. When we gather, it's 8:30.
Okay.
At 8:30.
We reconvene, we gather at 8:30, reconvene officially at 9 o'clock.
Correct.
And to Mr. Lawless, I would like to say that if you are here tomorrow, you may be pleasantly surprised. Once we get into the technical questions and the technical presentations tomorrow, you will find as many questions as Mr. Coward heard today, Mr. Wingard heard today.
We've got some superstars sitting up here, and not one question was asked of them. Got asked. All right.
And guys, there's an A&L subcommittee meeting, so if you could please stay behind for that. Thank you. Excuse me?